Well, it fits that ending that Courtney said, even though you grew up, Courtney, more with Mickey's Christmas Carol and I knew more Muppets, they have the same ending of Scrooge goes to the Cratchit house. And the
Yeah.
Cratchits are a much more central ending to the story versus in the 2009 version that we're going to talk about with Jim Carrey. And then in the book, he makes that bigger connection with Fred. It's more redeeming that he connects with his family. Like, yes, he also connects with Bob at the end. I'm going to give you a raise. They tell you like he becomes like a second father to Tiny Tim, but we see him go to Fred's house and he connects with his personal family. And that's a little bit more redeeming, maybe to Scrooge himself or how Dickens intended. But yeah, we all recognize like, oh, Tiny Tim, he crawls in his lap and it's a Santa Claus moment and it's so endearing. So that's why I said like it was so surprising to me because getting to read the true ending but knowing Muppet Christmas Carol, yeah, I was like, oh, we don't get Tiny Tim at the very end of the book like we do in all the films.
So this is the only version we've seen that's also a musical. And there are a number of other adaptations that have more songs. There's an Albert Finney version that isn't great, but that has some really great bangers, number wise. But Mickey has that opening song, and that's about it. The Jim Carrey version has nothing. Do you think the songs work? Do they make the story? I mean, I'm guessing I know the answer for both of you, but I'm just going to ask you any. What do you think of the songs?
I mean, for me, there's only a handful that truly stand out, and they're the ones that stand out for everyone. Scrooge in the opening, One More Sleep Till Christmas, and It Feels Like Christmas. Probably my favorite is It Feels Like Christmas with the Ghost of Christmas Present, just because it is holly, it is jolly. It fits I mean, all of them fit well on my Christmas playlist, but this one really embodies the season. One More Sleep Till Christmas, I'm like, I love it, but I can only really sing it Christmas Eve because it's the only time it's true.
Right.
So I like that song a lot, but it feels like Christmas is also so much of a bop. Like it gets stuck in my head after I watch the film. So for me, that's my favorite. I like the songs. It's a chance for them to be more Muppety. The Muppets aren't Muppets without music, in my opinion. So I really enjoy that they do that. And it doesn't change the story either. Like there's still, like I said, I was very impressed now having read closer how authentic it is to the original source material other than the ending, we'll say. So I like the songs. They enhance for me. They make it more fun. That this is why I revisit this one more than the others.
Sorry, I actually forgot to ask a question. Did you watch the version that has When Love Is Gone back in the story, or the version where it's cut?
I had the version where it's cut because that's
okay.
That's what's on Disney Plus. But then if you go into the extras on Disney Plus,
right,
you can watch it, but it's out of sequence.
Right.
Yeah, I saw whatever's on Disney Plus because even though Cordy, I said I grew up with this, we didn't own it. We watched it when it came on for Christmas, or maybe my grandparents owned it. It wasn't immediately in my house, but I did watch it every year.
Sorry, Paul, do you want to give some more context around that? I think I was cutting you off as you were about to tell us.
No, I was actually just curious about you two. I guess the context is that song is kind of an emotional linchpin of the story. It's the scene where you first see Scrooge break down at how this relationship that he probably could have saved if he'd known how to just destroyed him. And Jeffrey Katzenberg, who somehow managed to preside over a series of big Disney hits despite being to all appearances an absolute moron, decided that it was not Quibi enough for the movie and demanded they cut it because he thought kids would get bored. And in the theatrical version, it was cut. And the home video release, Brian Henson managed to get it back in, but that was the pan and scan video release. And so it's kind of been this point of contention where it comes out on DVD and the song's missing, but you can find it in deleted scenes. And they were supposed to this year actually finally reinsert it to the film proper and never got around to it somehow.
I'm hoping because next year is a big anniversary release with it being the 30th. I believe it was mentioned at a very recent, very niche Disney-sponsored D23 event. Kermit appeared there in person. Really great clips if you can look it up. that it will be getting a 30th anniversary release. And my takeaway was that will be reinserted and it'll be in 4K.
Excellent.
So excited for that.
I'm going to tip my hand a little bit. I did know about this controversy because I did also recently listen to Disorder podcast, another favorite of Courtney and mine's, where they analyzed Disney films, and that was their pick for this Christmas season was A Muppet Christmas Carol, and they had a whole discussion about that. So I didn't know because I just watched it. I actually didn't even look at the bonus features. So afterwards, I was like, really? There's a whole nother song? So I was surprised by that. So I know what you're talking about now, but I actually learned that also from Disorder. So that is a conversation that a lot of people are having. So I am excited too. I'd be really interested to watch this with it seamlessly put into the story and like how that changes how I see Scrooge.
It plays a pretty big difference. I mean, the song it's a ballad, and I know people who think it's too sappy, but I think that it really, it changes. I think it's a big difference from Dickens in that you watch it and it doesn't seem like young Scrooge actually wants Belle to leave. It's that he doesn't understand how to stop this from happening. And I think it really crystallizes the way this is less about a guy who just hates people and more about a guy who does not like being lonely, but does not have any idea how to like relate to other people. And that's kind of what the story is more about that in some ways than it is about his greed or his selfishness. For me, I love the songs. They can get. I think that Tiny Tim songs may be a little bit. It's so sentimental that even I break a little bit. But my favorite's probably the closing number, a Thankful Heart. I think it's just such a beautiful, joyful, kind of bittersweet song. And I think also learning a little more about Paul Williams, who wrote these songs. This was his first project after getting out of rehab, after spending decades under the influence of cocaine and alcohol and just being barely present, to the point where apparently when he met Michael Caine on the set of Christmas Carol and said, "Great to meet you," Caine said, "What are you talking about? We've lived together for a month in the 80s. I can't do an impression of Michael Caine. but I think that the songs are very much like they have the sense of someone, especially that closing song, the gratitude of realizing you just escaped something that could have destroyed your life, and that you now have a chance to rebuild your life and to reconnect with the community. I think that strand really powers the musical numbers, and that gives it an energy that's on top of the mourning aspect. With Henson's death, really gives it an emotional resonance that the other versions don't often have.
Yeah, as the songs become more familiar for me, that's what I think is really driving my growing love for this film. I think at first I gave it 4.5 stars on Letterboxd, and after the third one I was like, no, this is a 5-star movie, because now I recognize the songs and I'm getting into them. I absolutely love musicals, so for me that's really what drives my love of this film. And my favorite, like Emily, is It Feels Like Christmas. I feel like that song should be played on the radio. It absolutely fits the spirit of the season, obviously as embodied by Christmas Present. So that's my favorite, but there are so many good ones. I'm looking forward to just listening to it on Spotify, as I'm preparing holiday things like wrapping presents and all.
Every time I hear It Feels Like Christmas, I'm immediately like, how is this not a holiday standard?
Yeah.
How is this not, why isn't this? I mean, the song from Polar Express has become a holiday standard. How is this not on the radio every year? You're right.
So I want to bring back the question that we did for Mickey's Christmas Carol. Lots of Muppet cameos here. So again, apart from the main cast that we're going to get to, any favorite Muppets that were featured?
I really like, now this is a Muppet unique to this film, but I just like the Ghost of Christmas Present. It might be because I like the song that we're just talking about, but I think he's represented so well in this. There's so many cameos. There's some deep cuts. Like, I feel like I recognized the janitor from the Muppet Show. Like, they just put a top hat and like a little Victorian era suit on him. And it's like, it's fun to spot now that we've gone through, we're on the 5th season of the Muppet Show on Disney Plus, I've learned more about those older Muppet characters, and it's fun to spot them. I'd say both in this, and not to go on a tangent, but just like there were similar cameos in Muppet Haunted Mansion that I was like, oh yay, again, the search and find. It's like that meme of Leonardo DiCaprio from the Quentin Tarantino movie, like pointing at the TV. That's me when I find these little cameos.
Yeah, I mean, I love Gonzo in this, and I think they do a really great job of kind of recapturing the personality of Dickens' narrator, even though they kind of do it by separating Gonzo's jokes from the Dickens character's jokes. But I think I'm the same, Courtney, that Ghost of Christmas Present is just such a jovial, loving Santa Claus of a character, and it feels like he seems to be the character that they put the most of Jim Henson into, because they changed him a lot from the book. Like in the book, he's a benevolent figure, but he's also really he's really nasty to Scrooge. He's constantly calling him out on his awful things, shaming him, like, look at you, look at all these awful things you said. Look under my robe. Look at these kids. That's your fault that I've got these kids in my robe now. Whereas the Ghost of Christmas Present, you really get the sense that it's the first time in his recent memory that Scrooge has been around someone who acts as if he enjoys his company. The moment where he starts to dance a little bit hesitantly, as if he's like, oh wow, this guy likes me being around. And the way that when the ghost dies, they treat it like something sad as opposed to something scary. They add lines that aren't in the novel about nothing Scrooge could do could halt the relentless march of those terrible bells. That sounds like Dickens, but it's not, because Dickens doesn't really expect you to care that the ghost is dying. Whereas this one, it really feels like that's how they're saying goodbye to Jim Henson in some ways.
Oh, well, now I think about that also differently. I did notice that he's not as scary as say in the 2009 adaptation, and then also in the film, in the book. But I didn't think about the connection to Jim, and now I'm sad. I agree that he's probably my favorite Muppet outside of the main cast of characters. I like that he's larger than life. He reminds me of Sweetums in size, and like the sweetness of him, but he also has the sweetness inside and out in his design, whereas like Sweetums, he's sweet only after you get to know him. But it was cool seeing a full-size Muppet, and something I'm going to reference one of my resources again from Disorder. He's a large Muppet that has use of both hands, when normally like Sweetums has an arm that's not working, and he has both. So he's a really interesting, like large life-size Muppet that gets to use all of his extremities when puppeteering does make that challenging at times in larger puppets. So I like that. And I think you see the most cameos in the beginning of the film, where you're just going through the streets and there's just Muppets everywhere. So that's a really fun scene to just watch over and over to see all the different Muppets. I like the boomerang fish. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, he's wonderful.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Or also Fozzie-Wig's of ball instead of Fezziwig, it's Fozzie-Wig. There's a lot of Muppets in there as well. So that's really fun too. And again, just how serious or how matter of fact everyone takes it. He's Ebenezer Scrooge is an apprentice in a rubber chicken factory, because that totally exists in Victorian England. But again, I love the Muppet style of that it exists and it's so matter of fact, but it helps add to the level of ridiculousness as well that makes it funny.
I think that leads perfectly to our next question. And what do you think the Muppets add to the story that other adaptations cannot do?
I think what's interesting to me is that this is not the first Christmas Carol that inserts, well-known children's characters into famous roles. Mickey does it, Mr. Magoo did it, the Flintstones did it, etc. But I think it's the only of those where I feel like the characters who are assuming these roles, you really buy them as the characters they're playing, even though it's like you take your emotional attachment to Kermit that already was around outside of the film, and now it's actually working for the character. I think in part because the Muppets, they're wacky and they're silly, but they all also have a really strong emotional, core to their performers. And so when Kermit and Piggy and the family are mourning Tiny Tim's death, I think it's the only version of that scene that I've seen where I really felt like this feels like a family in mourning. And it's in part because I kind of know who these people are. I know their personalities, and this actually feels like them going through something profoundly devastating. Or when the hecklers, they're joking and they're funny, but you also buy them as in this film's world having the potential. They already spend most of their nights in our world bullying a hapless comedian. Of course, in Victorian London, given the opportunity, they would be tossing orphans out into the street and laughing at them. And I love the way that when Scrooge makes his more gravy than grave joke and they laugh at him, he just reacts as if he's in a Tennessee Williams play and just screams, "You always criticize me." And he starts crying. And you're like, is this like his origin story? That they bullied him and they bullied him until this is who he is?
I think something along those lines too that the Muppets do is, I kept saying that this is a decently authentic retelling of A Christmas Carol, and compared to the 2009 version, which is, I'm tipping my hand again, I think the most authentic of these three, I think the Muppets help find this middle ground of presenting a serious story. I don't want to say dark per se, but with very mature themes and making it accessible to families. So it kind of does what Mickey's Christmas Carol does without shortening or getting rid of some of the more mature ideas to talk about. It has those, but the Muppets help you digest them and help present them to a wide range of audiences. Whereas like the 2009, I can see kids watching it, but I see more non-kids watching the 2009 version. Like it is more ghost story, like the ghost story is the heart of the story, whereas the characters here are the heart of the story. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think they find a good middle ground of, let me tell the story authentically, but make it more approachable.
It absolutely does, because I feel the Muppets, they're not children's entertainment, certainly. I think, they're for everyone. So the Mickey one in particular feels more geared towards children, whereas there's an accessibility to children with the Muppets, but there's a lot in this for adults as well. And that's why I think the Muppets are often so strong at adapting classic literature. I would love to see more films in the vein of this and Muppet Treasure Island, which we've discussed before as well. Just give us more Muppet content to read classic books and do more episodes like this.
Well, and I think also what Dickens and Henson have in common is that they both they take whimsy and silliness very seriously. And that, like, for them, it's not that whimsy and silliness detract from important truths and values, but that you need them. You need silliness, you need humor, you need to be able to let your hair down and laugh and be a child again if you're going to address the serious problems that the world has. And I think that Henson lived up to that ideal more than Dickens, who in his later life kind of became as monstrous as his worst villains in a lot of ways. But I think that probably is why, like, in this moment, they're simpatico and they fit together so well for the same designs.
Yeah, I really love that comparison. So rounding out our triple feature today is Disney's A Christmas Carol, or sometimes more simply, A Christmas Carol, directed by Robert Zemeckis. And this film was released on November 6, 2009, and was produced through the process of motion capture, a technique used in Zemeckis' previous popular Christmas film, The Polar Express. The film reunited Disney with Zemeckis, who previously directed Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and the film stars Jim Carrey and Gary Oldman in multiple motion capture roles, joined by Colin Firth, Bob Hoskins, and others in supporting roles. So let's give our thoughts on this one.
Oh boy. So I find this film both fascinating in some respects and near unwatchable in others. I actually saw it in theaters. And because I was intrigued by the idea, and I'm also just a big Christmas Carol junkie. I needed to see it. It was all hyped up. And if you can see this movie in 3D, I recommend it, even if it means sitting through it again, because the way it uses 3D, it really does feel like a hour and a half theme park ride. Like um I hadn't been that wowed by an audiovisual roller coaster until Courtney and Doug took me to Disney World a couple of years ago before the pandemic. But until then, that was kind of like the only. It's just the way it makes the foreground and the background move in different directions, the way that it builds London as a actual space that you can move around through. That one that feels not like a soundstage, but that actually seems like, oh, this is how the city that exists right now has always been that city that's been a fantasy in these Dickens stories. And I think that there is something in the way that it's able to be more faithful to certain aspects of the book because it's motion capture. Like Scrooge actually does look like a frail, pitiful old man because he's a animated character. You don't have to worry about Michael Caine or George C. Scott being too regal, being too important to let themselves look like they're about to die. Whereas Carrey, you can see his zits, you can see the way his face is, all his pockmarks and whatnot. But it's just like, it's bending over backwards to try to show that it's checking off all these boxes of things that are in the book. Look at me, look at how I'm doing all these things in the book, without ever once feeling like there's any sense that it cares about the story it's telling. That it never feels like there's a point in which I'm being asked to believe in the characters' emotions. It just feels like it's a theme park ride. It's the way you would feel if you went on a theme park ride that was themed to a Christmas Carol. You go in a theme park, you go on Mr. Toad's Wild Ride or Snow White's Scary Ride or whatever that's called. They're not meant to be a emotional experience of that movie. It's using the movie as a device for this thrill. That's kind of what the movie is. And in a movie theater with 3D glasses, that's almost worth it. But at home, it's much harder to overlook everything else.
Now that you've mentioned, see it in 3D, I never thought of that. And watching it at home, those camera angles, the rushing through the streets when he's with Ghost of Christmas Past, the way the house and the room works with Ghost of Christmas Present, I was like, that's an interesting choice. But that makes amazing. That makes so much more sense, though, that if you are making this movie to put it out in 3D, that makes a lot more sense to me now than when I first watched it.
I was gonna say, was this your first time watching it, Emily?
This is my first time watching it.
So your thoughts?
Things I liked about it was I like being pure to the book. So for those out there, I'm gonna give really bad teacher advice, but if you have to read it for school and you're like, I don't want to read it, I just watched the movie, watch this one. Because you will get all those scenes we talked about, like with Ghosts of Christmas Yet to Come, the scene with like the parents or the family that's happy that he died because of the mortgage, but also going through his stuff, like nothing is cut out. You get from reading the book, Marley, when he's visiting, like, yes, he has chains, but they explain what the chains are. Whereas the other versions, they just have chains and they just say, they're the chains I forged in life. And then they continue. But like he really explains what the chains are. And he looks out the window and sees all of the ghosts that are still chained to the world. Like every little detail is in this that I could catch. I don't think maybe they trimmed down some dialogue or description, but every scene is in there. Meaning his past love and how they broke up and it's all there. So I really admire it for that if they were going for authenticity, I think they nailed it on authenticity. And if you want to know the story but not read it, like this is the one to go to. But I do get that it did feel a little long. There were points where I was feeling a little drained, maybe because I know the story now that I've read it. I've watched Mickey's Christmas Carol twice. I've seen Muppets multiple times. I was like, okay, just get on with it. We know what's going to happen. So I felt some parts were a little long where they could have trimmed a little bit, but overall, still my favorite part was Ghost of building up and then Ghost of Christmas Present. I did think was really cool, and he was scary. Like I really felt like this one told it as a ghost story it was spooky and it was scary.
I don't know if the scariness is because the animation looks half rendered to me, but it has.
Yeah, the animation was a little weird. Like the close-ups, really cool, but like the overall, like in scenes, and maybe we're just desensitized with like how far computer animation has come. I'm like, they felt very robotic, or like some proportions from like shoulders to like to neck were a little off.
Yeah, the animation is what I wanted to hone in on, though. I did say I had a story for each, so bear with me here. I did see this in theaters, and my mom and I we love Christmas movies. I feel like we'll see a movie in the cinema together at least once every year, and that's a tradition that we've long held for over 20 years now. So I remember seeing this in the cinema with my mom. Maybe we did see it in 3D, and I was like, the 3D is cool, but I just feel like I walked away being like, I did not really enjoy that. And it's funny because I was talking to my mom on the phone recently, and I was telling her that we were doing this podcast, and I was like, yeah, we're doing the Mickey one, the Muppet one, and that Jim Carrey one that we saw, and she had no recollection of seeing this whatsoever. And I was like, I was like, yeah, like, you show the Polar Express in your kindergarten class. It's that same technology. She's like, this is not ringing a bell. So I think that's unfortunate because it does have merit, as we've all said, in its authenticity. On the animation point, I feel like this movie was just made 10 years too early. Like, Paul, you made a lot of great cases for the animation and what it's able to do in its portrayal. And I unfortunately think that motion capture was not where it needed to be to hold up and to stand the test of time. So if they had perhaps attempted that just maybe even 5 to 10 years later, it would have more of a wow factor, because it feels like I'm watching the rendering bloopers from Shrek when I watch this. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, the wow factor to me is entirely in the set design. Like, no, the moment the characters walk on screen, it's like, yeah. I think in part, it's not just technology, it's that they want to have it both ways. They want the characters to look hyper realistic, but they also want them to look like the Leech illustrations. And you can't do both. And trying to do both just makes them look like Cronenberg monsters. Especially Bob Cratchit, who just every time he comes on screen, you're like, please go away.
Nightmare fuel for sure.
Yeah.
So talking about the animation, I want to ask, do you think that the animation is primarily what is kind of takes away from the story? Like, yes, it is probably, I think, the most authentic retelling, but do you think that's what takes it away? Or also like Jim Carrey, how he played Scrooge? Like, what is it that disconnects?
I think
for me,
go ahead, Paul. No, I don't know. The animation is what I make fun of in this. I just kept cringing.
I think the animation is distracting. I can overlook that. I feel like where this loses authenticity is that there's no narrator, and you don't need a narrator to make the story work, but with the absence of the narrator comes the absence of most of the tone and the comedy. And so that there's a lot of technical, yes, that did happen in the book, but you've lost the reason why it happened or how it comes across in the book. Like the moment Courtney pointed out, the narrator's like, the spirit was as close to Scrooge as I am to you, and I am in spirit right next to your elbow. Whereas the film just shows the spirit getting super close to Scrooge. And it's like, yes, that's literally what the narrator said, but it's not, you've lost the little joke, and now it just looks creepy. Or when the narrator says, like, Scrooge said he would dine with Fred. Yes, he said he'd go that extremity of the expression and go to that other place beforehand. Yes, we know he means I'll see you in hell first, but the narrator plays it as a joke. Whereas in the film, when Scrooge just glares at him and says, I'll see you in hell first, and the room just goes quiet, the tone is just so different, and it just feels like a Cliff Notes version of A Christmas Carol that's very thorough, told by a student who never actually thought for more than a few seconds about the story itself.
Yeah, and it's strange to me because it seems like Robert Zemeckis' goal was to make this super faithful adaptation, but I think he got too hyper fixated on that goal, so to speak, and lost sense of some of the other magic that might be missing along the way.
Do you all feel like the absence of Disney or Muppet characters makes this more authentic? The fact that because that's it's interesting because we're doing the Disney versions, the one that only has real people is the outlier. Whereas if we look at the history of this story, it's mostly live action adaptations. So I wonder, like, does that make it seem even more authentic because it's compared against, well, Bob Crouch is a person. He's not an anthropomorphic mouse or a talking frog.
As I kept saying, I think this is the most authentic retelling in the sense that it captures all of like every detail in the book, but you're right that it does miss some of the emotion. And I think what makes me return to A Mickey's Christmas Carol and Muppet Christmas Carol is that emotional attachment to those characters.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're someone, although you are someone who has a big attachment to A Christmas Carol as a story, not necessarily just because it's Muppets or Mickey, which is really the only versions I've grown up with. You also don't have as much of an attachment to 2009. So that's really all I could think of, is maybe someone who really cares about that part of the story. But yeah, it's kind of missing some emotion, and maybe a lot of that emotion I carry over is because of how I feel about Mickey and Kermit, like you talked about. But yeah, I think it's incredibly authentic, but not going to be one on my holiday roundup that if I'm going to pick one Christmas Carol to watch, because I have so many other Christmas movies I want to watch as well, Muppet Christmas Carol or Mickey is going to be what I turn to first before this one.
Sure.
I kind of feel like Muppets is just as authentic. You know, it just also has songs in it. But when you think about the dialogue, there is a lot of overlap in some of the lines that Gonzo says and what's used in this script. Maybe this is the right word, is like the more straightforward adaptation, but I think Muppets does it just as well.
Yeah, I agree. Or I think it depends on how you define authentic, because I think that in terms of Muppets it includes a lot of, I think it's the only adaptation that really figures out a solution to getting the Dickens narrator tone in the story somehow.
Yeah, it's the only one with a narrator.
Yeah, and a narrator who's funny, which I think does a lot of heavy lifting there. It gets a lot of the dialogue from the book into the film as well, but it feels like it's very focused on what emotionally, morally, thematically it wants to do, which is, that to me makes it feel more authentic than Zemeckis' version that I think does want to restore the political aspect of the story, but it's just so caught up in the amusement park aspect of it that it never quite lands there. I will say, I'll give it this. I think that there is an extent to which, my wife was a Victorianist, and she's pointed this out. The Victorian London was a horrifying place to be. It was filthy and covered in excrement and smog and disease and whatnot. And because the Christmas Carol has become such a nostalgic thing, we think Victorian London and we think, oh, cozy. I want to be there, even though Dickens is himself in the story just emphasizing the city was filthy. It was covered in soot and dirt and smoke. Thank God for Christmas. Otherwise, it would have been unendurable. And I think the Zemeckis version, because it spends so much time building London from the ground up, does give a little stronger sense of, okay, here is actually what it would be kind of like to live in this city, even if it then kind of cancels that out by making it into a theme park ride. I don't know. I will say really quick, if you want a similarly literal, authentic, gets as many things from the book as it possibly can, the 22-minute Richard Williams 72 version actually is as thorough as this one is in a much shorter period of time. And it actually gets some things that aren't in this from the book, including the whole lighthouse, ships at sea journey that Christmas Present takes him on. Recommended for that alone.
Thank you for the recommendation. I think overall it's clear which we found the most faithful, and we might have already tipped our hand towards this next part of the question. Let's move into our overall. We have compared and contrasted a bit, but moving into that directly, which adaptation is everyone's favorite?
Oh, Muppets by a New York mile. Leaping, like, balance and distances across the rest of them. Yeah, I think
not even a contest.
Not even a competition. Yeah.
I agree. I absolutely love the Muppets. And while I kept saying like 2009 is authentic, I like what you said. It has to, what's your definition of authentic? 2009 is authentic in the sense that it checks every single little detail out of the book, but it doesn't check the emotion, and it doesn't check, like you said, bringing Dickens' voice into it, like the Muppets do. And the Muppets are just fun. And with the music, like this is what I'm going to revisit year after year after year. Whereas 2009, I might pick it up every now and then. I don't know. I'm not really looking forward to rewatching it after watching it for the first time ever. Maybe if I get a chance to see it in 3D, I definitely will want to. But yeah, for me, Muppets, they just do such a charming job.
Yeah, when we first came up with the idea for this episode as we were brainstorming this podcast itself, I felt like I was going to be here prepared to fight to the death for Mickey's Christmas Carol, because that was what I had watched for nearly 30 years now. But as I've said, the Muppets have grown on me so much, and so I'm gonna give it to the Muppets as well. It's just so good.
We've kind of maybe gotten this in some respects, but we've talked about like overall which adaptation we like the most. What about individual characters like Scrooge and Cratchit and Marley? Do you feel like, I mean, I think for me, that's kind of a unified front, but are there like outliers for you where like even if you prefer one movie, you think that one other adaptation nailed a character the others didn't?
I think universally I'm still going to pick Muppets, although I do think Scrooge McDuck is, I mean, he is Scrooge. It's very authentically Scrooge McDuck's character in some ways. He's probably more forgiving and more family-oriented while not being Scrooge, but his love of money, like it makes so much sense to make him Scrooge. It's even his name. But I really enjoy how Muppets did it, and I'm going to go back to what I said about Minnie. Having Miss Piggy as Emily Cratchit, she got to say the things that she says in the book. She got to be a little feisty. I want to stand up to Mr. Scrooge. I know he's the person who helps us like pay for things, but he's not a good person. Whereas like Minnie doesn't get to, so I'm like, we're missing that there. Mickey, we spend time with him and you still love Mickey and you still love Donald as Fred, but I feel like because of the time, we just don't get to spend as much time with them. And Muppets, like we've said, like hits that nice middle ground of, yes, Jim Carrey's version, all of the characters are there, but we're missing the emotion, whereas the Muppets bring the emotion.
Yeah, my answers are actually really varied on this. The Muppets, as I've said, is my overall, but I don't know, Doug and I were playing this fun game because he watched all of them with me, and I was like, let's go character by character. Or it might have been his idea. Go character by character and say what we thought was the best. So I'm just going to go really quickly. For me, Scrooge is Michael Caine because he's just so fantastic in that role. The way that he plays it with absolute seriousness against the backdrop of these zany Muppets. Bob Cratchit for me is Mickey Mouse. I feel like Mickey embodies the optimism of Bob Cratchit really well. Like that's just that type of personality. To me, I'm going to give Robert Zemeckis Jacob Marley, and probably only Jacob Marley. Maybe just because he's so creepy in the animation.
That's true.
I feel like
really scary.
Jacob Marley is supposed to be scary and ominous, and that came through in the animation for me. I don't know. I personally feel like Goofy's a little miscast, but it was like, well, what do we do with Goofy? We can't make Jacob Marley Donald because he has to be Fred, so I've always felt that one was a little weird to me. Tiny Tim is probably my most difficult, but ultimately I would probably give it to Robin, though I always had a fondness for like the little baby Mickey. I was like, Mickey and Minnie had a baby when I was a kid, and I just thought that it was really cute. But personality-wise, probably Tiny Tim. And then Spirits, I think Jiminy is my favorite Ghost of Christmas Past. Again, that might be my fondness for that film, but the other ones are kind of creepy to me, and I just like that, Jiminy, he's so little, he's a conscience. That feels like strong casting to me. I've already shared how much I love the Muppet Ghost of Christmas Present. I might give it to Pete for Ghost of Christmas Past. I like his little cemetery joke that we shared
he's
before.
He's the only one that gets to talk.
Yeah, I that might be contradictory, but I like that he gets to talk. Emily Cratchit, Minnie Mouse should have gotten to talk, but agreed with you, Emily, that Miss Piggy, like that's just the personality. She's sassy. She's not going to take anyone's fluff and stuff.
One thing I miss in all these is that the Ghost of Christmas Future yet to come. I really love the way in the book when Scrooge starts begging, he shakes a little bit. Like the ghost shakes a little bit as if he's kind of vulnerable, or it is kind of vulnerable. And maybe it actually is just an extension of Scrooge. And none of these versions and most of the other versions don't really get that part of it. It's not just the scary, it's also, movable in the first place. But I guess back to the question, I think I'm with Emily for the most part, just pretty full on, all in on the Muppets version for most of these characters. Michael Caine, I think the only reason he didn't win an Oscar is that he was surrounded by Muppets and people didn't pay attention to the performance as it would have in any other context. It's astonishing. I probably have to begrudgingly give the Zemeckis version credit for, Fred, I think Colin Firth's Fred, if you can overlook the animation, is closer to that character, and what he's supposed to represent than the Muppets version, who, as I indicated, kind of feels a little bit like a jerk to me. I like Kermit and the hecklers in this version of the story, but I will acknowledge that the Gary Oldman in both those roles is probably closer to what Dickens described in terms of Bob Cratchit being not especially bright, simple, but good-hearted, as opposed to Kermit, who's more of a wise, presence. And, Marley, the jokes come from, the humor in that scene comes from Scrooge's awkwardness in the book. And the movie actually, the Zemeckis version does kind of get that across. But again, I think the big demerits are that even though intellectually I can say that, you look at their faces and they're so horrifying that it just cancels out everything else. So it's a full Muppets for me.
Well, it's been fun revisiting this story and its film adaptations. We are Disney fans. We also like going into these stories. So let's talk about theme parks for a little bit. So theme park appearances, the one that I immediately thought of, and this is also due to my role that I had as a college program participant, Minnie and Mickey have been seen meeting and greeting over the years from Thanksgiving to Christmas in outfits inspired from the 1983 animated short. So Minnie in that dress with the bonnet, it's blue. I think I've only really seen it closer to Thanksgiving. I think Christmas, they tend to want to break out some of the more candy cane red and white and greens. But I have seen them in those outfits that actually come from A Christmas Carol.
I just saw images recently of the merriest nights at Disneyland, which I know we'll get to as well. But they had Goofy as Jacob Marley as a meet and greet. And I was like, oh man, be fair to Florida. Please bring that to Walt Disney World. Here at Walt Disney World, we have had a few recent additions. There is a Christmas Carol segment in the Sunset Season's Greetings display at Disney's Hollywood Studios. So usually maybe a little bit before Thanksgiving through the end of the Christmas season, there are intermittent projections on the Tower of Terror at Disney's Hollywood Studios. There's a Muppet segment, which is not Muppet Christmas Carol. It's like a Swedish chef baking montage. There's some Olaf's Frozen Adventure scenes. And there's a very brief one with Mickey's Christmas Carol where they play the opening song and kind of transform the tower into those vignette scenes that open up the film. Our favorite Muppet Christmas Carol song, It Feels Like Christmas, was actually featured in the stage show that was previously at Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party pre-COVID. I'm hoping that show comes back, but that was a delight to see that song in a new light or in a different setting.
And more recently, we've seen the Muppets in Disneyland take on a role in the season, now caroling on a bus. It's not necessarily a Christmas Carol theme. I haven't watched every clip available. I don't know if they ever sing one of their songs from a Muppet Christmas Carol, but we see them in their seasonal best and taking part. But that's really all, at least Courtney and I could think of. If anyone knows of anything else, please let us know. But how could we, I want to pose this question, how could we incorporate A Christmas Carol more into the theme parks for the holiday season?
I would love to see a stage show with the Muppets, like dedicated to that. It could take place of the castle show at the Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party, or put it in one of the theaters at Disney's Hollywood Studios. They've certainly done Muppet-themed shows before, or the live Muppets in Liberty Square. I would lean into the Muppet history in particular to bring this tale to life once again for theme park guests.
It's interesting to me because it seems like Dickens-themed theme park is just so obvious, since we already kind of have a nostalgic attachment to the way those movies look. They actually did in England. I've read about this, and it didn't last for reasons that'll become obvious, they made a Dickens world in this small town in England, and they tried to like it was all indoors, and they tried to double down on it being an educational. This is what it was like to be in Victorian England, and I think the park just never got its head around making this both a place people would want to visit and making it authentic to the misery that was Victorian England. And I think it's probably any challenge of a Dickens themed theme park is going to be that. But it does seem to be like, isn't Epcot doing something with a Mary Poppins-esque Victorian London sort of?
They're
I guess it's not Victorian
supposed
London, but
they announced an attraction that was supposed to open October 1st, 2021, but it hasn't happened yet. So
that just
we'll
seems like
see.
the obvious
to
me. Like give Epcot London, give it a little bit
of
a Dickensian backlot sort of. Let people feel like they're walking through, the sets of one of those movies, and you can take those to the various rides and whatnot. That'd be my way. You could make that Mary Poppins in the year round and make it Christmas Carol in the winter season. The other thing is that you have to deal with the heat, right? You have to deal with the fact that it's going to feel really weird if you're wandering around in this snowy looking city and it's 95 degrees out.
Yes, that's true. Gotta adjust the weather dome.
I think there's just a lot of easy things we can do to just have the story itself present. Like we've seen in Boo Bash or Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party, like in the PhilharMagic Theater, they play The Adventures of The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. Like you can very easily play on a loop the 1983 Mickey's Christmas Carol short, like just have that available during the party, a place you can go and watch it. I think you could in Liberty Square have the Muppets do a quick retelling even throughout the square. What if you open it up to more than just those 3 windows, like other buildings above, like Liberty Tree Tavern, and like you have to turn around, and I think you could do a retelling there. Or like you said in Epcot, bring back the Streetmosphere. Didn't they have street performers that
they
like put
are
on
back.
Shakespeare? Oh, they are fantastic.
Well,
they can...
not the Shakespeare ones. Sorry, I was going on the Christmas stuff. We had Father Christmas, Père Noël, those storytellers, but you meant the improv people.
They tell a Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
Like I think there's very easy ways to reinsert just telling the story using what they already have, which is Muppets and at least Mickey's Christmas Carol. You have those already in animation form. You have the Muppets already have played those roles. I think you could use them pretty easily.
I think those are all strong ideas, and we've posed a lot here today, but we always love to leave our listeners with extra resources. So I'll kick us off here. I wanted to recommend Disney Coast to Coast episode 793. This was from the Christmas season last year, and that episode took a similar approach examining all 3 films, but this one had more of a unique lens, primarily focused on the character of Scrooge. Host and former Book of the Mouse Club guest Jeff DePaoli was joined by actor David Coffey, who has been portraying Ebenezer Scrooge for nearly 30 years. So that's a great accompaniment to our own discussion to hear from someone who has embodied the role of Scrooge, hear his take on each of the different Scrooge representations across the 3 films that we've discussed as well.
I tipped my hand a little bit earlier, but Disorder Podcast, they've renumbered. They're now in what they call season 2. Episode 8, their most recent, was an analysis of A Muppet Christmas Carol. So if you want to spend even more time with A Muppet Christmas Carol than we did, I encourage you to check out their discussion. They go through the entire film, talking about each scene, as well as background, its legacy, etc. There's also a new Muppet Christmas special to check out on Disney Plus if you want more Muppets in your holiday season. I haven't looked at it yet. I think it's called Letters to Santa.
It's an older.
New. That's from the
is it?
I think. Yeah.
Oh,
also,
then I shouldn't say that.
It's new to Disney Plus. I think it's about 15 years old.
I didn't know about it. I actually never knew that existed then. That's on my watch list for this weekend, so I haven't checked it out yet, but I encourage others. And I own the Barnes & Noble copy of A Christmas Carol, and that is coupled with Dickens' other Christmas story. So, Paul, you kind of said like, when I mentioned the others, but, if you are interested and maybe Christmas Carol is your only introduction to Dickens, maybe that's a good segue to read some more of his other work and then maybe take on A Tale of Two Cities or Oliver Twist?
Oh, I think it's more the other Christmas stories. If you're going and expecting Christmas, you might be disappointed because
Okay.
they were sold at Christmas, but only The Haunted Man actually is set at Christmas. The others are set at New Year's. And I love Cricket on the Hearth, and I like the other ones in various ways, but I just feel like if you are going for like the spirit of A Christmas Carol and you go to these other stories, you might feel, oh, these are actually really big downers. They're not as funny, they're not as playful. Honestly, I know it's long, but if you want to like to chase A Christmas Carol, David Copperfield, even though it's long, flies by, and it's got a very similar, um, accessible, funny, emotional sort of journey to it.
Okay, great. I know I want to check out some more Charles Dickens, expand my repertoire beyond just A Christmas Carol. So thank you.
Anytime. I guess for me, I kind of prep for this by using it as an excuse to look at some Dickens biographical stuff that I hadn't really explored too thoroughly. I really recommend Claire Tomalin's biography, Charles Dickens: A Life. It just, you fly through it. It's exhaustively researched, but it's also not too long, and it really, I think, captures both, Dickens at his best as someone who could be capable of really inspiring altruism and charity, and put so much of his time into causes that he thought were important, who could also be, especially in his later years, extraordinarily cruel to his family, especially his wife. And I think that kind of seeing those two sides of the person really brings his work into relief. And if you want to dig into A Christmas Carol specifically, there's Stratford's The Man Who Invented Christmas, which was also made into a movie. It's kind of a short and sweet history of what Dickens was up to when he was writing this, and the kind of legacy of the story. So both good kind of extra reading if you're really itching for that.
Well, we always appreciate extra reading around here, and we'll be excited to kick off the new year and a new season with an author interview in January. We'll be joined by Matthew Hodge to discuss his recently published book, Cool Cats and a Hot Mouse, A History of Jazz and Disney. And here's a brief description for those of you who might be interested in reading ahead. What does king, a queen, a duke, and a talking mouse have in common? They're all part of the intricate tapestry that helped define American entertainment, built by two different yet connected pioneering industries, jazz music and Disney. Cool Cats and a Hot Mouse, A History of Jazz and Disney is the first of its kind. Award-winning composer, professor, and author Matthew Hodge offers this unique book as the first entirely dedicated its pages to exploring the vast histories of these two worlds. While rising in popularity and importance during the same decades, jazz and Disney spent more than a century consistently intertwining in ways that are remarkable, inspiring, surprising, complicated, controversial, and everything in between. Whether a jazz listener, a Disney lover, a fan of both, or unknowledgeable of either, this book will navigate readers through the many fascinating stories. With nearly 300 significant jazz artists and Disney properties referenced in these pages, Cool Cats and a Hot Mouse guarantees to entertain and educate readers of all ages as they journey through America's jazzy landscapes, sprinkled along the way with plenty of Disney magic. In the meantime, you can keep up with Book of the Mouse Club on Twitter and Instagram at Book of the Mouse. Email us with comments or ideas to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. Please be sure to leave us a review on iTunes so others can find our podcast and read and listen along with us. You can keep up with me on Instagram at Great Gutsby or on Twitter at Courtney_Guth.
And you can follow me, Emily, on Instagram and Twitter at the same handle, Emily_McD. And Paul, where can our listeners connect with you and your work?
So you can follow me at Paul_the_Cote, Cote, just like Winnie the Pooh. Also, I'm going to be a wife guy right here and plug my wife, Rachel Verona Cote, wrote a book about Victorian culture, kind of apropos for today's conversation. It's called Too Much: How Victorian Constraints Still Bind Women Today. And it's about the ways in which attitudes about purity and emotional excess that were used to control women back in the Victorian era have persisted to the present day. It's a really fun book that it is, to a certain extent, it's about Victorian history, but it's also about pop culture today, and she weaves her own personal story, including a little bit of cameos from me, into that. So obviously I'm biased, but I recommend it. Couldn't recommend them more highly, especially if you are now with a whetted appetite for Victorian themed stuff.
I have read the book as well, so I can co-sign that endorsement. Thank you for being an excellent partner in plugging her work as well. As our guest of honor, though, it's you who get to give us the final quote. What have you picked to share with us today?
Well, I thought it would be worth going back to the book itself. And, I probably could have found something a little bit cuter or pithier. But ultimately, I think I had to go to the one that keeps on just sort of rattling through my head. It's the scene where I think we've referenced it, where the ghost of Christmas Present spits Scrooge's surplus population back in his face. It's when Scrooge is worried about Tiny Tim dying, and the ghost says, "Oh, he's gonna die, but who cares? If he's gonna die, he better do it." And decrease surplus population. But start the quote here. "Man," said the ghost, "if man you be in heart, not adamant, forbear that wicked cant until you have discovered what the surplus is and where it is. Will you decide what men shall live, what men shall die? It may be that, in the eyes of heaven, you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child." Oh, God, to hear the insect on the leaf pronouncing on the too much life among his hungry brothers in the dust. And I think for me that last bit, every time a politician or a lobbyist or a pundit or a executive tries to claim that giving people in poverty more welfare or jobs or any sort of relief is going to make them dependent or make them less productive, as if any of these people have ever worked, any of these people making the claim have worked a hard day's work in their life. I think that line just really stands out, and it's kind of upsetting how powerful it still is and how little has changed in some ways. So, not to be a downer, but that's where I want to land right now.
I think it's very fitting, just as you said. So we thank you for sharing that quote with us today, and of course for sharing your time and so many wonderful insights in this discussion. Thank you again for joining us.
This was so great. Thank you for having me.
And we hope that everyone has a happy and healthy holiday season. Find that joy, that generosity, that spirit of giving and receiving, and having a wonderful season. And we'll see you in the new year. In the words of Tiny Tim, God bless us, everyone.
The Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.